Well, hello, everyone. Hello, Fountainhead, Rhode Island community. Erica Busillo Adams, board member here with the amazing Casey Woods from the Overwatch Project. I just want to welcome you all to this latest Fountainhead, Rhode Island Community Spotlight. Before we get to Casey, I want to thank our sponsor, Cross Country Mortgage, for helping make these spotlights possible this year. Thank you so much. And just a brief FYI for everyone watching right now, we will be discussing suicide and suicide prevention. I just want to put that out there. But let's get right into it. Welcome, Casey. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your personal career journey to start and how you came to lead the Overwatch Project and about the Overwatch Project itself, its origin story as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Erica, for having me. Thank you, everyone out there who's listening. Really excited to be here. My name is Casey Woods. As Erica said, I am the executive director and founder of an organization called Forge. We are the only national nonprofit that is specifically focused on working from within the gun owner community on transformative non-political projects to end gun suicide and gun homicide. The Overwatch Project, which I'm mostly going to be talking about today, has strong Rhode Island roots. I'll be telling you about those, but it's our veteran suicide prevention project, and I'll get into the specifics about that in a minute. But Erica, you asked about my personal history and how I got into this work. I am from Arkansas. I come from a big family of gun owners, so it's a real big part of my roots and one of the reasons why I chose to do this work. I also used to be a reporter. I was a local news reporter covering crime and local government. And obviously you see a lot of things in that role. I was at a lot of crime scenes. I actually witnessed a lot of gun violence myself. I was a witness to the immediate aftermath of a gun suicide. So it's something that really matters to me. It hits you profoundly. Those stories that you cover really never leave you as a journalist. And when I left the newspaper, it really was, I was struck by this world of gun ownership that I grew up with, and then the world of gun violence and loss from gun suicide and gun homicide that I covered as a journalist. And so I was really wanting to do something about that. And it felt like there was a big gap which was there's 50 to 60 million gun owners in America. 2/3 of gun deaths are suicides. So 2/3 of those are gun owners who are taking their own lives. And yet the politics on this issue are so fraught and complicated and polarizing that we often can't make progress even on the things that we agree on. And so that was the gap that we set out to fill with Forge. We have a lot of different projects. We work with groups around the country. Overwatch Project is the centerpiece of our gun suicide prevention work. And we came at that because obviously gun suicide is very complicated. There's a lot of stigma around mental health in general, but around guns and suicide, there's even more stigma. I would say it's one of the most stigmatized pieces of the suicide prevention mental health space. And yet, unless we do an effective job, we do a better job of reaching gun owners, including veterans on this, we're not going to bring those numbers down. And so what we set out to do with the Overwatch Project, there is something in the clinical universe, in science, called lethal means reduction. And it basically says that if you put time and distance between someone who is in crisis and the thing that they might use to attempt to take their life, you can save their life. It's proven, scientifically proven. There's tons of studies. It's considered one of the most proven suicide prevention strategies. But as a communicator, I'm looking at this and like lethal means reduction sounds awful, right? And then like for the veteran community example, or for gun owners in general, who's talking to them about this? Doctors, who they may or may not trust to talk about something as sensitive as firearms. So I'm looking at this and I see you have a solution that people are not using because it's got a branding and a messenger problem. And I feel like that is something that we can solve. And so we set out, we actually piloted the Overwatch Project in New England. The whole idea was to build the Friends Don't Let Friends Drive Drunk model, a peer intervention model, except instead of talking about alcohol and cars, we're talking about firearms and suicide. So you got a buddy, he or she is in crisis, you're worried about them, You're trying to help them feel better, get help, all the things that veterans are doing every single day. But while you're there, you have a conversation about their firearms. Can you secure them? Can you hold on to them? Can you do anything where if they hit that rock bottom impulsive moment, half of people who attempt and survive say they thought about it for 10 minutes or less. So it's this snap decision. Can you build some time in so that that doesn't end in a suicide? And so everything we do as an organization is collaborative. We always want to bring in a ton of voices and people and experts. And we actually worked with some suicide prevention researchers in Massachusetts in the UMass system. We worked with more than 300 veterans over the course of 3 years in New England. We had worked with post-traumatic stress support groups. We worked with student veteran groups. We had a creative hackathon with veteran motorcycle groups and organizations actually in Rhode Island.
That's so cool.
So it was amazing. And we believe in the power of getting people in a room and just opening the floor and asking questions and getting creative. And also people own it. Right? If you, I call it the power of the half-baked idea, where if you go to somebody and say, I've got this all figured out, I want you to step in and be part of this. It's very different if you go to them and say, help us solve this problem. And so that's what we did. And it was a really extraordinary process. And like I said, a lot of it played out right in your neighborhood. We actually have 3 board members in Rhode Island, which we're very proud of and honored to have as part of our organizations. So with the Overwatch Project, then, there was one population of people that we were really focused on, and that was people who had done this. Veterans who had intervened to ask a friend about their guns when they were in crisis, or somebody had done it for them and a life was saved. That's success. How do we replicate success? And so I used to be a journalist, as I said, and I would just interrogate these people. I would just be like, well, what did you say? Like, what are the words you used? And veteran after veteran, I don't know how many people who are listening spend a lot of time with the veteran or the military community. They are very blunt. And veteran after veteran said to me, I just effing asked him. And I'm saying effing here because I know a lot of people are at work, but that's not what it says on our website. And so that became kind of the informal name for the campaign in my eyes. And I also always thought we were going to have like a vanilla version with no F-bombs. And then we were going to have like a really gritty in your face version. And so then as we were road testing it, sometimes with veteran groups in Rhode Island, we did a lot of piloting training. Every time we would tell that story, the just effing ass story, people would laugh and they would lean forward. And it would change the room. It would say, well, these people aren't PC. They're not trying to be clinical. This is something I can imagine a veteran saying that. And so
it's accessible. There's something like, it's just, and I think it immediately brings your walls down, actually.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Especially it's authentic, right? It really, it gets people's attention, right? We are memorable. We are unlike any other suicide prevention outfit that you've encountered. And so we did the pilot. We decided to go for it. We're a smaller organization. We can take some risks in our branding. We don't have to worry about offending people. And so that's our call to action. The website is overwatchproject.org if anybody wants to look at it while they're watching. And so we made the pivot from a local pilot in New England to a national platform in December 2019, right before the pandemic happened. So we obviously had a real big pivot at the beginning of the year, where we made a big shift from kind of local in-person trainings to now we're doing a lot of virtual national trainings with big national veteran service organizations. And, what we have tons of resources on the website. It's really focused on how do we destigmatize these conversations? How do we, when Friends Don't Let Friends Drive Drunk launched, 30 years ago, it was totally normal just to let somebody stumble to the door at a party. We all saw it, like those of us who are old enough. But then what it did was it created a new norm. And the year after it launched, there was a 10% drop in drunk driving deaths, the single biggest year-over-year drop in history. And now 70% of Americans have intervened to stop somebody from driving under the influence. And we've had a huge impact on those drunk driving deaths. And so that's what we're trying to do with the Overwatch Project. And the way we're doing that, we have different verticals for how we're reaching people. Norm change is a very ambitious goal, right? I mean, let's just be real. But the way that we tackle it is, how do we empower other people to lead? You know, we don't need to be everywhere. What we want to do is, these organizations that are already doing suicide prevention and peer support, here's another tool in your toolbox, and here's how we're going to give you, we're piloting right now a train the trainer, so these organizations can do their own Overwatch Project trainings. We're actually, next week's our first one. And then we're going to create this suite of resources where it's plug and play. People can take it and run with it. It doesn't require us to be in all these rooms. We are also developing a family member component later in the year, where our focus has been peer-to-peer, but there are, obviously, the family members are often the first to see there's a problem, right? And they may not know that it's important to talk about firearms in the home, or they may not know how to broach that conversation. And so we are, trying to create all these resources. We're really big on storytelling. You know, as a journalist, I believe that people often, there's that line that people don't remember what you say, they remember the way you made them feel. And so we have a documentary film crew that works with us, and we're doing stories of success around these practices and these norms around the country. We're getting back on the road to do that next month, because we kind of got interrupted because of COVID. And in telling these stories, creating tools so that there's all these different ways. Say you got, a group of veterans, you could just show them the film and have a conversation about it. You don't have to have any formal training. We have developed a cultural competency training for clinicians that we piloted at UMass as well, that was focused on helping clinicians, because sometimes it is that conversation, right? How do you have a conversation with a gun owner or a veteran in crisis to talk about this really sensitive topic? So there's all these different ways that we're coming at it, because, there's that in advertising, and somebody will probably correct me on this, but, it's like 100 touches before you recognize a brand. How many touches does it take to build a new norm? And so we got to come at it from all these different directions.
I mean, everything you're talking about is amazing. And I did want to ask, you touched about, on the stigma of mental health, and that's something actually Fountainhead RI has been focusing on this year. And I feel like it's even more pronounced for veterans. And I was curious about, how prevalent is suicide among veterans right now in the United States? Because a lot of folks might not realize how prevalent it is. And then I do think one of the strengths of Overwatch Project is this peer-to-peer model, and that veterans feel that, they're talking to other veterans who understand and have been there and get it in a way that a doctor or a clinician might not get it, or probably doesn't get it. And so, how does that model in particular, how have you seen that model work well?
Yeah, you're totally right. In the military community, the sort of things they teach you in basic are in a lot of ways very contrary to the idea of seeking help. And so it's be tough, you got to be a leader, all these things that don't show weakness, all these things that make people give them the skills they need to lead and be, really proactive members of our active duty military forces, are antithetical to you to get help when you need it, right? And that's changing. There's been a lot of work, to destigmatize this. There was a lot of fear that going to get help for post-traumatic stress in the military could impact your career.
Absolutely.
And so it's really, it's important to acknowledge that and understand that sort of you're already overcoming all this stigma around mental health, but then you've got this extra added stigma of, you got to be tough to be in the military. And so that is really pronounced. There's actually been a lot of research on that. It's not like just a theory, it's a fact. And there is some really great work going on, kind of promoting, like, go get care in the as active duty military. There are some really amazing stories of like leaders in the military who go to the very publicly go to therapy appointments to show that it's okay, right? That you can do this. And sometimes they'll say, I don't even need to go, but I'm just showing my team that this is okay and that I want them to do this. So there is a really big stigma around that. And that culture just doesn't just go away when you transition out of the military. And so there's an ongoing process that with the veteran community to really destigmatize that as well. So I'm really glad to hear that y'all have been working on that, because I think that as a society, everybody needs to be working on that, and tackling that so that we all feel like if there's a moment of crisis, you can go get care. I will say that the issue of firearms makes that even more complicated. I know a lot of veterans who don't get care when they are struggling because they're afraid they will somehow lose their Second Amendment rights, or they will be flagged and their firearms might be, ability to own firearms might be impacted. And so that fear and that stigma is even heightened. I think that, for the folks out there who don't own firearms, who don't own guns, the number one reason why gun owners own firearms in America today is for personal protection. Surveys have shown this. It's not hunting anymore, which used to be the number one reason. It is, I want to protect myself and my family. And so what you're talking about when a suicide happens is like, there's this thing that I have because I feel like it's an integral part of my family's safety. And then in my moment of most crisis, you're talking about separating me from it. So it's a very complicated conversation, a lot of stigma, a lot of fear. And so what we're doing with the peer-based approach is when it's it's two buddies talking to each other, there's not that fear, he or she is not coming to take away my firearms. They are supportive of my Second Amendment rights. That conversation is very different. And I also think that when it comes to mental health, the power of peer interventions, right, at all levels, veterans, young people, adults, anyone, it really, putting on the table and being willing to go there. I think there's people who are afraid sometimes that it's going to cause people to think about suicide. And actually the opposite has been proven by putting out there and saying, hey, I'm worried about you. You've got, you've got some stuff going on at work. Maybe your family life is there's something going on with that. And if you're truly worried about someone, and this would be, my advice for everyone out there, just to say, like, I'm worried about you. Are you thinking about taking your own life? Or do you think about ending it? Or, it's a lot of people who are struggling. Like, it's a relief to have somebody say that it's not this big, scary thing. And then the minute you talk about it, of course, it a lot of times that helps, kind of just diminish the pressure, and then you can talk about solutions, right? How do we get you some help? Who can we bring in your family to support you? And then I would put the plug in, if you have any reason to believe that they own a firearm, just to say, hey, a lot of people who are going through stuff you're going through, gun owners, might make decisions about how to secure their firearms differently just until you feel better. Or maybe I can hold on to them for you. Just putting it on the table, just effing asking, as we say, is the most important part. And that is the day, just like with Friends Let Friends Run, the day that people, all Americans are empowered with the will and the knowledge to intervene in that critical moment is going to be we're going to be lowering those suicide numbers.
Something that struck me in the videos I've watched on the Overwatch Project website with veterans too is, friends asking friends, like, do you have a plan for your firearm? It's a simple question. Do you have a plan for that if you're in a place or you feel like you're getting to a place that, you're not feeling safe with yourself, or you feel like you might harm yourself? Do you have a plan? It's a really simple question. And it's, but I think until that's asked of you, that's not something you would think about, right? It's just not.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, in the military, there's always a plan. A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D, right? And so this is it. Planning is a very familiar concept for this community. And so that's, when we, you know, kind of we try and echo that in all of our materials. It also,
like a personal crisis management plan.
Exactly. And ideally, our ultimate goal is that we back these conversations out of the crisis moment. It's very hard to make decisions when you're at your moment of most crisis, when you're at rock bottom. And so we actually started something that we're going to be promoting more over the course of the next year called the Advance Guard, which all of our terminology is military, and we have an awesome focus group of veterans and military folks who help us come up with these things. So the Advance Guard is about, can you have a proactive conversation about firearms and suicide? And so just like you got somebody in your life who, you know, supports you, that there are stories like this on our website where buddies who have a deal, where if one of them's in crisis, the other one holds onto their firearms, and then vice versa. And so the idea is to go and have a proactive conversation like, hey, if I was ever in crisis or something was going on with me, however you want to put it, would you hold on to my firearms, or would you help me secure them? Or would you help me kind of be accountable and have a conversation about it, right? And then vice versa, right? And somebody is much more likely to say yes to something when you're asking them for help, and then to say, well, would you want me to help you, right? It just, because it destigmatizes the conversation. And so there's an amazing story on the website for anybody who's interested. Jay, who is one of the veterans that we worked with from the very beginning, it's this sort of chain of people asking, right? His father was a Vietnam veteran who lost his first wife to suicide. And so when Jay came back, had post-traumatic stress, was really struggling, and then his best friend killed himself, which was obviously a huge blow to him. And, you know, the kind of thing that just, he was a peer counselor and he still didn't see it coming. And he really struggled with that. So he hit rock bottom, and his dad was worried about him. And so he's like, I lost my first wife to suicide. I can't lose you. And so they had a plan. When Jay was not doing well, his dad would come and he would hold on to his firearms. And sometimes he would show up and his dad would have just come over to his house and he would have taken all of them. Not everybody is going to be in that position, but he would just show up and be like, Dad, so I see you've been here. You know, you worried about me. And they trusted each other, right? And now Jay does that for his friends. And so he had that conversation with his friends, and what he says on there is something that I love to quote, which is, it's an awkward conversation every time you have it. And what he says, he told his friend the first time was, you know, you might be pissed off at me. I'm going to, for asking this, but I'd rather you be angry and alive than mad at me and dead. And so I think that's you know, a very blunt way to sum it up for all of us, is like, the risk for not going there are much higher than the risks for going there, right? There are ways to have that conversation. You know, I am worried about you, right? So don't be afraid, like, just for my benefit, I would like to know this. And so that's just a way to kind of take the air out of this really kind of complicated conversation and get people to open up and talk about it in ways that lead to solutions that save lives.
And this is like, as we're talking, this is really helpful information, honestly, for anyone who has someone that they love that they feel like is in crisis or is heading toward crisis, just to simply have the conversation and bring it up, you know, and make it visible, right? As opposed to you're worried about someone but you're not sure what to do, or you're afraid to bring it up, and that person's clearly struggling but afraid to bring it up, and that's when, you know, tragedy happens, right? Versus just bringing it out into the open air.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Yes.
I'm aware of time. We only have like a few minutes left, and I could keep talking to you about the amazing work that you're doing forever. But I did want to ask, for the community watching right now, how can folks get involved with the Overwatch Project and Forge? How can they connect with you? Is there anything coming up you'd like to share with the community at large?
Well, as with many nonprofits, you know, we've always got a lot going on, and I have, you know, I tell people one of my superpowers is I get really talented people to volunteer for us, and that has been one of the ways that we, you know, we're a relatively small nonprofit, and we pull way above our weight, and so we're always looking for, you know, we have some specific needs around volunteers. We're, for one example, and if anybody's got special skills that they think would be helpful to us, I want them to reach out. You know, we're going to start merchandising, right? We've got people asking us for Overwatch t-shirts. We're looking to put together, you know, a skilled team that can help us manage that probably I wouldn't be able to afford if you know, I like working with that. We also have, so we have some needs like that I would be happy to go over with anybody who is interested in helping us put together help on projects. We also are gearing up. We have a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign that happens in the fall. You know, we're going to be kicking off in September. And last year, Rhode Island, our people in Rhode Island raised a lot of money that has allowed us to provide our trainings for free to hundreds of veterans around the organizations and to pilot this new trainer. So if anybody's interested in putting together a team, there is no team or no amount too small. But we are looking for Rhode Island to really represent again this year, and they put us into like a really good place last year in our fall fundraising campaign. So if anybody's
awesome to hear.
doing a peer-to-peer team, reach out. So
you heard it here, little roadie folks. We need to keep our good reputation for doing some great peer-to-peer fundraising. Well, thank you so much, Casey. This has been a fantastic, a really important conversation. I think it's great to talk about this stuff like during the lunch hour and just normalize it, that this is an important conversation to have. Just effing ask, everyone. I look forward to those t-shirts and other merch as it comes out, hopefully in the next year. And we have a couple of community spotlights coming up in the next few weeks for Untitled Rhode Island community, so keep your eye out for those. And our next big panel event, The Economy and the Big Reopening, is going to be August 18th from 5:30 to 6:30 on Zoom. It's free to register, so you can find more info on that on our Facebook page. And you can also find the handle to connect with Overwatch Project as well. And please go to their website, donate, get involved, volunteer, tell your friends, tell your loved ones, please tell all the veterans in your lives and active service members in your lives about this program. I think it's critically important. And thank you again, Casey. Any closing words for folks?
No, just effing ask. You handled it. And, you know, if any, you know, more important than anything, if anybody has any needs around suicide prevention, you're concerned about someone, feel free to reach out about that as well. We're always here to help.
Thank you so much, Casey. And thanks everyone out there in live stream land. See you next time.
Have a great day.